This is Newt, and I'm going to report on the third night of the convention, which was really very interesting, particularly for Callista and me. So I'm going to start with our events. We each made a speech on Wednesday night. Callista's was on religious liberty, and mine was on national security. And I thought you might find it interesting. So I thought before I get into all the other things, and it was a very lively, amazing evening, which I think you're going to find fascinating. But let me first share with you first Callista's speech on religious liberty, and then my speech on national security.
Tonight, we look toward a brighter, safer, and more prosperous future with Donald J. Trump as our next president of the United States. When I served as President Trump's ambassador to the Vatican, I witnessed the importance of having a president who stands up for religious freedom. Over the last 4 years, the failed policies of the Biden administration have jeopardized our right to worship freely and weakened our nation. Freedom of religion is one of our nation's most important foundational principles. Throughout our history, the right to practice our faith has been at the heart of the American experience. Today, this fundamental right is under attack. In recent years, the radical policies, rules, and regulations imposed by our own government have threatened people of faith. However, we have reason to hope. In our lifetime, no president has done more to advance and defend religious freedom than President Donald Trump. During his term, President Trump defended the rights of doctors, nurses, and teachers to act in accordance with their conscience. He appointed 3 Supreme Court justices committed to protecting our God-given right to worship. He expanded school choice and defended the First Amendment freedom of every student to practice their faith in public schools. As president, Donald Trump signed an executive order that defined international religious freedom as a moral and national security imperative. And he was the first and only president to convene a meeting at the United Nations dedicated to ending religious persecution and defending religious liberty around the world. Tragically, many of President Trump's policies have been replaced by the Biden administration's anti-faith agenda that uses the power of the government to impose its far-left ideology on religious believers. Biden's FBI has even stated that practicing Catholics present an elevated risk of domestic terrorism simply because of their faith. Unlike President Biden, President Trump has a proven track record for promoting and protecting religious freedom at home and abroad. Our choice is clear. We need strong leadership, bold action, and unwavering commitment to preserve our God-given rights. I am confident that President Trump will continue to fight for our founding principles and beliefs when he becomes the 47th President of the United States.
You know, President Trump understands that the world is dangerous and that it takes an enormous effort to defeat anti-American and anti-freedom forces around the world. He also understands that when faced with multiple adversaries across the globe, the Reagan principle of peace through strength is the only road for safety for the America and the American people. The contrast between President Trump's realistic policy of resolute strength in a dangerous world and President Biden's policies of appeasement, weakness, and self-delusion may be the biggest difference between the Make America Great Again movement and the Make America Weak ideology of the left. We have to remember that the greatest threat to American safety is not Biden's brain. The greatest threat is Biden's policies and the people he appoints to implement them. He is working towards appeasement when the world today is incredibly dangerous. A growing coalition of dictatorships is actively trying to undermine American power and conquer America's allies. A religious dictatorship in Iran, which chants death to America, is on the verge of having nuclear weapons. Russia's dictator has unleashed the deadliest European war since World War II. Communist China continues to develop its military power while actively seeking to undermine America through espionage, fentanyl, and the infiltration of our companies and our universities. Faced with these clear and present dangers, President Biden has adopted failed policy after failed policy. Where President Trump orchestrated an orderly end to the Afghanistan war with no American killed in nearly 2 years. Biden ordered a chaotic, panic-filled withdrawal that left 13 American troops and hundreds of Afghans dead. Where President Trump insisted on keeping Bagram Air Base, which is located within 1 hour of the Chinese nuclear facilities, President Biden gave it to the Taliban, who are now allied with Communist China. Where President Trump brokered the Abraham Accords and was moving the Middle East toward peace and cooperation, President Biden's weakness and confusion led to a terrible Hamas assault, killing more than 1,200 innocent people in Israel. Under Trump, we achieved peace through strength. Under Biden, we have war, suffering, death, and a world teetering on the edge of World War III. Like Prime Minister Winston Churchill and President Abraham Lincoln, President Trump understands that only a firm, courageous policy of strength will work in a dangerous world. The message for this November is clear. You can vote for weakness and war with Biden, or you can vote for strength and peace with President Trump. Let's dedicate ourselves to making America safe, strong, and proud again with President Trump. Thank you very much.
Well, I hope you found those two speeches interesting. We've certainly gotten very good response to them. And immediately after Callista spoke, Peter Navarro, the advisor to the president, college professor, economist, came out and was wildly received because literally he had gotten out of federal prison in Miami that morning and was showing up at the convention to speak that evening, and virtually everybody in the room regarded him as a political prisoner. There was no reason for him to have been put in jail. He had showed great courage, and he and his girlfriend both came out. He talked about the experience and basically said, look, I did this because I want to make the case that none of you should ever have the kind of prosecution that I had. People were very enthusiastic about Peter. I think he certainly earned a significant sense of being a great warrior in the Trump system because he stood up for his rights. He refused to bow down. he was willing to spend 4 months in jail rather than doing what they wanted. That was followed by a lovely couple who Calista got to know in the green room. They were, I'm guessing, in their late 70s. They own a ranch in Arizona right on the border. They routinely every day have hundreds of illegal immigrants come through, and their testimony was very powerful about the cost of Biden's terrible open border policy and the threat they personally feel. They were really very, very effective. We also had a 94-year-old World War II vet speak. He was very articulate, talked about Normandy, talked about his experiences in Europe, and he was charming. He just, had the right kind of personality. He obviously loved being at a national convention. It was beyond anything he'd ever expected. He was very effective in reminding us that patriotism is so important and that being willing to fight and, if necessary, die for your country is a key to our survival. So that, again, was a very powerful, very emotional moment. And it was followed by the Gold Star parents. As you know, there were 13 young Americans killed in Biden's disastrous collapse in Afghanistan. Biden recently said in the debate with Trump that no one had died on his watch. Total, complete lie. These parents were so powerful. If you haven't seen it, I really urge you to go to C-SPAN and pull up the section of their testimony, because it is so just devastating about Biden's callousness, his dishonesty, his lack of interest. Has apparently never publicly mentioned the name of a single one of the 13 young Americans who died serving their country. He has refused to meet with and talk with the parents, and it was one of the most emotional moments of the whole evening because they just were so compelling and so convincing, and you couldn't believe just how bad their experience had been, having lost, in many cases, their son or their daughter. I think that was one of the most powerful things I'd ever seen at a national convention, and I certainly recommend very strongly that you should watch the Gold Star parents. We also had a very compelling presentation by the husband and wife whose son is still a hostage in Gaza, an American. And I have to say, this was probably the most pro-Israel and pro-Jewish and against anti-Semitism of any convention. I've been to 9 conventions now. And clearly people are coming together. They're solidifying. They're understanding what the issues are. They realize that the attack on Israel is indirectly an attack on America and certainly an attack on Western civilization. These parents were just very compelling in telling the story of their son, who has been held in captive now, I think, for 288 days. And it's tragic. Then, on a much lighter side, Kai Trump, Don Jr.'s oldest daughter, had decided she wanted to talk about her grandfather. She was charming, very personable, quite in control of herself, and was one of the high points just as watching sort of A Star is Born, as this bright young lady talked about her grandfather, of course, a big golfer. And she's apparently a very good golfer, that he'll call her and start talking about golf, and she'll say, "Grandpa, I have to go to school now, but I'll call you back later." And it was just really nice. And it was part of a serious effort, which also had been taken up by Laura Trump the night before, to communicate the human side of Trump, the degree to which, when you see him as a father and as a grandfather, it's a very different kind of experience. One of the things I noticed about the convention, and I think it was a function just of sheer adrenaline, the convention would suddenly break into chants. And I'd asked Lindsay Larkin, who was an intern with us this summer, to go through and listen to the whole convention and pull up the chants. So here are the things that were being chanted. USA, USA, USA. Newt, Newt, Newt. We got this, we got this, we got this. Fight, fight, fight. Texas, Texas, Texas. Strong again, strong again, strong again. Build that wall, build that wall, build that wall. Send them back, send them back, send them back. Drill, baby, drill. Drill, baby, drill. Drill, baby, drill. Trump, Trump, Trump. Never forget, never forget, never forget. Joe must go, Joe must go, Joe must go. Bring them home, bring them home, bring them home. Corey, 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 referring to Corey Comparatore, who was killed in Butler when President Trump was wounded. JD, 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 which was during Don Jr.'s speech, talking about JD Vance. Let's go blue, let's go blue. This was very funny. JD Vance, of course, went to the Ohio State. And so the Ohioans began talking about the Ohio State, at which point the Michiganders began yelling, let's go blue, let's go blue, let's go blue. It was the oldest continuous college football competition. It was pretty funny to watch. It was all spontaneous. They chanted, yes, we are, yes, we are, yes, we are. This was about J.D. Vance. Then J.D. introduced his mother, who had now been cleaned for 10 years after a tragic lifetime of addiction. She was there, and the crowd broke spontaneously into J.D.'s mom, J.D.'s mom, J.D.'s mom. And then finally, J.D. Vance talked about his grandmother, who was the person who raised him during the period when his mother was suffering from drug addiction, that he had always called her Mama. And so the crowd started chanting, Mama, Mama, Mama. Now, I have been to 9 conventions. I have never seen a convention break into more than, 2 or 3 or 4 chants. They got 19 different chants in last night, and I thought it was fascinating. And I think it tells you something about the sheer level of adrenaline that's underway, that people are so excited and so thrilled. President Trump now has been to every single night of the convention. He walks in calmly, people applauding and everything. He sits in the presidential box, and Cliff and I had the opportunity last night to sit in the box 2 rows behind him and to watch everything that was going on. He comes in, sits in the box, chats with people. They rotate people about every 15 minutes so he can see a pretty good number of people while he's sitting there. Very calm, doesn't make a speech, doesn't get deeply involved, but watches the convention. I mean, this is the convention he designed. It's a convention he believes in. He's a great showman coming out of his years with The Apprentice and with Miss Universe, and he likes these things. He was there in a way, paying attention in a way that I don't remember any presidential candidate with this kind of personal involvement. He didn't have to be the center of anything. He was very happy listening and watching and seeing how things unfolded. And then, of course, the evening really culminated with J.D. Vance's acceptance speech. I must say, I thought it was brilliantly done. It started with the introduction by his wife, who was Indian American and a lawyer in her own right, very smart. They met at Yale. It communicated the human side of him at the same time that it was communicating key public policy positions. And I thought overall he was very effective in coming across as somebody who you'd be very comfortable either having a beer with or talking with or having as your vice president. So I think he and Trump are off to a pretty good start, and I thought it was a very successful evening. Next, we're going to go this evening, of course, for the big finale. Secretary of State Pompeo is going to speak, and of course, the last great moment will be President Donald J. Trump, and I think that it will be wild. I predict the minute they mention his name, people are going to go crazy. For at least 5 minutes, the demonstration will be so big he won't be able to speak. But we'll see, and I will certainly report on all this tomorrow.